I've been working for the last couple of years on a couple of big projects, and each requires a lot of research. One is a play about Thomas Edison after he's dead, better than having him alive, actually. It's a one-person show called Edison in the Ether. I've begun writing it, but it's not appropriate for here. I'm not an actor, and we don't have a stage set. So the other project is a novel, which is a thriller set in northern New York, right along the Canadian border. And I've got the first 2 chapters going, but once again, they're not ready. But I knew I had this reading coming up, and I wanted to have something new, so I wrote what will be the first essay in my second memoir. The last essay in that memoir I have done, I did it 3 years ago. Mike White shamed me into doing a keynote address, so I wrote that, and I thought, well, that'd be a good last essay in a memoir. So I figure, well, actually that one is called Teaching God's Daughter, and it was about 3 weeks I spent in Fiji teaching the daughter of a guru and a cult leader. His name is Dafri John, and a Google search will reward you with that. So I figure at the present rate of production, 1 every 3 years, I'll be inviting you to the book party in 2063, about. It won't take that long. So this essay I'm going to do tonight it's pretty self-explanatory. The thing I want you to know about it is not only that it's the first essay in this book, but the underlying theme of this book is becoming a writer. So all these bizarre events in my life that have happened, I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about them through the lens of being a writer. So, after I wrote the first draft of this back in May, I sent it to a few friends to read. They all sent back sympathy cards. So, 2 of them actually are here tonight, Shelley Evans and Baron Wormser. Heartless people. I'm kidding, their comments were helpful. So this is the second draft of this essay. And the essay is called Bravery. Shuffling these papers is probably causing trouble with a mic, right? It's all right? You're not even listening. It's all right, Gabriella. It's good. She's like, oh yeah, it's fine. It's like, do-do-do-do-do. Order up, God damn it, Wild Bill hollers, and that's how the trouble begins. This is only my 7th graveyard shift, but I know Bill's downward trajectory by heart already. Some random cursing, accompanied by the grease-free back of his right hand shoving his thick-framed glasses off his sweaty nose, will be followed by him crumpling an order slip, a dupe for duplicate, I've learned, and tossing it over the steam table at a waitress. Write him so I can read it, he'll snarl, then spit in the eggshell bucket under the counter, and give it a kick for punctuation with his good leg. Soon, as his meds begin to wear away, he'll start ragging on whichever customers he can see when the far door into the kitchen swings open. And though this is only a rumor, if a customer is stupid enough to yell back, he might unload on them and then storm out, which would leave me to handle the rowdy after-bar crowd on my own. It's 2 a.m. on Saturday, July 2nd. 1966 at the Prospect Mountain Diner on Route 9 in Lake George, my first official restaurant job. I can't truly say that at 16 I deserve it. When I showed up for my tryout 5 weeks ago, on the first morning of Memorial Day weekend, Jim, the harried chef on duty, barked at me to flip a pan of eggs. Flip those? I asked, pointing at the pan. Jesus Christ, you see the line out front? You want to work here or not? So I grabbed the pan with both hands and tossed the eggs up into the air. Unfortunately, there was a small wall fan right over the stove. And the eggs, well, lucky for me, my father's a friend of the diner's owner, Phil Patnod. Right now I'm on break, sitting on the wooden back steps that face the drive-in theater next door, catching the 3rd showing of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. On the giant screen, framed by lines of evergreens that march up the spectral slope behind it, George, a college professor played by Richard Burton, asks his wife, "Are they married?" Elizabeth Taylor is Martha, George's buxom wife. Scarfing down a salted chicken leg, she answers, "Yes, they're married to each other." Cluck. She's pressing him to remember a film where Betty Davis arrives home, plops down a bag of groceries, and announces, "What a dump." Who's Afraid's been playing all week, alternating with "The Russians are coming, the Russians are coming." And I've managed to catch this early scene in the couple's kitchen several times already. Why does George stay with her, I wonder once again? Just because her father is president of the college where he teaches? Are you kidding me? Show some backbone, buddy. I hear Wild Bill growl behind me, "Bouncing, Barb, goddammit, your order is up. Move your butt in here." "What a dump," Martha reminds George, then concludes, "She's discontent," as she filches a drag off his cigarette. "Well, what's the name of the picture?" "I really don't know," George admits. "Well, think," she yells. One of my father's lines, "Gotta love Liz Taylor," suddenly pops into my head. Last year, carefree during one of my parents' summer cocktail parties, he had confided that assessment to me. "Same name, same great tatas as your mother," he slurred, winking, acting as if I were actually a friend and not mentioning the awkward fact that I had walked in on him and Dolores Mooney in the upstairs bathroom a few minutes earlier. Why does he stay with her? I apply that same question to my parents' marriage, though the Jim and Betty dynamic is the opposite of George and Martha's psychological free-for-all in Albie's story. In my family, my father is the aggressive one with a feral sex drive and the hair-trigger temper, though he's usually pretty smooth with his flirtations. He prefers the promise-them-anything car dealer shtick over the Stanley Kowalski approach. But I've seen him in action enough times, I can now decipher the coded overtures lobbed toward his future conquests. What does my mother expect? I ask myself. I'm not necessarily taking my father's side, just stating the obvious. If you ask your parish priest to condone being celibate in your marriage, as my mother did after my brother Tommy died, and after her next child, David, was diagnosed with cerebral palsy as an infant, then your days with a faithful husband are probably numbered. My father's away in Canada all this week. He left on Wednesday with Bob Sherry for their annual macho sojourn at a remote fishing camp up near Hudson's Bay. It's more than okay with me. I get to ignore the alternate day dating ban imposed by him and my girlfriend's mother and sneak off with Helen 6 days in a row. "Last chance, Barb. It's flying through the door next," Wild Bill shouts. The wooden steps sit 2 car lengths from the drive-in movie's back fence. On weekends, they alternate the 2 features all night long, from when it gets dark until after the bars in town close and the serious rush begins here at the diner. My holiday double grill shift runs from 9 at night to 11 the next morning, so I can catch parts of the 2nd and 3rd showings through the weekend, especially if Wild Bill's in charge of the kitchen. He doesn't give a rat's ass about anything but the pain meds the Veterans Administration doles out to him for whatever slowly toxifying metal the North Koreans deposited in his leg, though he clammed up about how it happened. My friend John, who washes dishes on the morning shift, drove Wild Bill to the VA Center in White River Junction, Vermont yesterday afternoon to refill his morphine prescription. But for some reason they had run out, or they told him he'd come back too soon, one or the other. He spat curses out the window the whole way home, except for when he suddenly turned to John and grabbed his arm. "Don't you go fight for these bastards," he told him, "and it ain't about bravery no matter what they tell you." When I picked Wild Bill up at his SRO off Canada Street in Lake George Village before the shift, he was already scraping at the scarified tattoos on his arms. I knew a hard night was coming. Couples who park in the back rows, far from the beckoning fluorescent glare of the refreshment stand, never bother to hang the speakers inside their cars. They leave them in their 2-pronged post cradles and just crank the volume all the way up. The heat they generate fogs up their back windows, and a long row of ghostly rectangles glows back at me now, hiding the backseat shows. "I'm tired, it's late," George groans, and his dialogue blasts out in a tinny surround sound that echoes across the drive-in's parking field. "I don't know what you have to be tired about," Martha scolds, moving to the sink. "You didn't do anything today. You didn't have classes or anything." Roy's wife, Bertha, rolls toward me from the parking lot. Ernie the bear has the night off, so Bucky and Roy are the dishwashers on duty, and Bertha labors by to check on her hubby every couple of hours. She's so massive that her layers undulate independently of each other, caraming and receding inside her flowered muumuu like swells trapped in a wave pool. But I feel shallow the second I paint her that way. Like everyone else in my family, I carry 15 to 20 extra pounds. The favorite saying of my father's Aunt Marion, "The Patricks run to flesh," arises unbidden, and I feel ashamed for judging her. "Roy here," Bertha grunts, and I stand up to open the door for her, but she pushes past me. "Hey, baby," she cries, spotting him, and yanks the screen door so hard it fails to creak. Inside, Roy is struggling to lift a full tray of dinner plates off the wash rack. In his stained undershirt, he looks skeletal. He's completely hairless and sports only 2 teeth, a left canine on the top arch and a right incisor on the bottom, but that doesn't keep him from grinning mindlessly all the time. "Hi, Mama," he blurts out and disappears into Bertha's hug. Roy served 27 years for murder in FCI Great Meadows, the maximum security prison in Comstock, and he's only been free for about 18 months. At first, I couldn't figure out why the boss had hired a senior citizen for a punishing dishwasher job, but it turns out Roy's only 48. "Take a break," I tell Wild Bill, hoping to slow his inevitable meltdown, but he's too wired to stop, and, truth be told, the diner's filling up with Devil's Disciples members. They're the upstate New York Hells Angels Copycat Biker Club, and it's weird they've started to drift in before last call. As I lay out rows of bacon and sausage on one half of the grill to prepare for the upcoming rush, Bucky slides over to hawk his porn shots. He slides the first glossy Polaroid past the steam table and skinnies himself against the wall to avoid the swinging door from the counter area. "I told you, Bucky, not in the market. I've got a girlfriend," I remind him. "Not like her," Bucky snorts, taps his middle finger on the photo twice. I can't resist a look, even though I feel guilty doing it. The teenage girl is leaning against a stained lime green sofa, her left leg splayed out at a painful angle, and her right one tucked up under her bare butt. A sheer pink something is bunched around her waist, and she's inserting a hairbrush, handle first, into her vagina and sticking her tongue out at the camera. "Bet your gal can't do half of what my cousin can," Bucky says, and shoves a second photo over the first. In the second photo, Bucky's cousin is now on all fours, thrusting her butt toward the photographer, the hairbrush firmly in place now, bristle end hanging down. $5 a piece, Bucky offers, for them nights you're on your own. "Put this crap away," Wild Bill snarls, slapping the porn shots onto the floor. Dishes are piling up. "Orders," Barb sings out and slaps 3 dupes on the shelf over the steam table. "One at a time," Wild Bill says. "Too busy for that," Barb answers. "Gonna kill that broad," Wild Bill mumbles. But Barb's already out the far door, the one that leads to the 2 rows of back booths, every one of them overflowing with bikers in full regalia. I think I can figure out what's coming next, but it turns out I can't, and time shifts into slow motion mode. Wild Bill's sweating more than normal, and he coaxes his greasy black hair off his forehead with his egg-crusted coat sleeve. Then he reaches into the egg bin with both hands at once, splaying his fingers to grasp 2 eggs in each hand. I've seen him do this probably 50 times this week, but somehow I'm transfixed now, as if we've entered the eye of some impending storm. He cracks all 4 at once on the white bowl lips and drops them, yolks unbroken, into the waiting bowls as the far door swings open, lazily, and a biker the size of the professional wrestler Haystacks Calhoun steps into the kitchen. "Where's my breakfast?" he hollers, and Bertha makes an immediate beeline for the back steps. "I got it right here," Wild Bill says, not turning. Then he grabs a pan with 3 over easy in it, spins and hurls the steaming eggs in one fluid motion at the biker. One of the 3 hits the wall over his head. Part of another only speckles his beard, but the third scores a direct hit on his death's head shoulder patch. As Haystacks brushes madly at his tainted patch and his roar of outrage fills the kitchen, Bucky and Roy bolt after Bertha, and part of me wishes Wild Bill wasn't blocking my path to freedom. However, another part of me feels wonderfully alive, strangely detached from my predictable fate in the next minute or so, and curious to see what could happen. Wild Bill doesn't share my curiosity. He grabs a 12-inch carving knife, raises it over his head, and limps quickly around the corner of the steam table. Haystacks takes one fast look at Wild Bill and, biker friends as backup or not, lumbers out through the swinging door. When Wild Bill gets there, he holds the door open with one foot and screams, "It's my goddamn kitchen. You're all guests here. You better fucking remember that." End of part one. Doesn't taste a week old. Sonia told me it was old water when I came up. I said, "How old?" When I arrive home later that morning at 11:30, my father's waiting for me. He sits outside on the patio holding a phone and listening, his forehead bunched into angry lines as he concentrates on the call. He motions me to sit across from him, and I sink down, too tired to care what he's upset about now. Wild Bill finally got fed up about 4 a.m. The bikers kept taunting him, and when one hollered, "Where's our food, you gimpy prick?" he tossed a soup pot through the top half of the screen door and followed it out. Partway down the steps, he turned to me and said, "A bunch of animals." Only that. Not whether he'd be back or where he was going, not, "Sorry, you're screwed now, kid." He never even took the egg-stained towel from around his neck. He just limped off toward Route 9, and then I had to handle the breakfast rush alone until Jim, the day chef, came in at 8. "I'm serious," my father says into the phone. "Give the kid his job back. Billy probably deserved it." I know exactly what he's talking about. The day my father left for Canada, I drove my small glass-drawn boat over to Henderson's Marina to buy some gas. Midday, I think. I'm sure it was after lunchtime, because the mail had delivered my first rejection slip around 1 p.m. I had sent a group of poems to The New Yorker, assuming with my usual hubris that publication there would be a slam dunk. The minute the poetry editor read my Lake George cycle, bingo. Published poet, book contract, name and lights, all the rest. Unchecked teenage ignorance. The point is, I felt like crap already as I climbed out of my boat at the gas dock and tied it up. The college kid who worked at Henderson's was named Nils Nilsson. He attended some prep school in New Hampshire, he had told me. He was captain of their football team. Hands bigger than spiral hams. Before I could ask him to fill my gas tank, he punched me in the face. Now, I'm no stranger to fists or to injuries. I've served as my older brother's favorite punching bag for years. It slowed down for a while after I stabbed him in the palm with a meat fork. All true. But a couple of years ago, after a hockey practice where I had checked him a couple of times, he came flying over the front seat of his car and slugged me. Broken nose number 3 for yours truly. Rage is way too strong an aphrodisiac for both my brother and my father. And I've played hockey since I was 5 years old. Started my share of fights on the ice, I have to admit. But apart from that, my front teeth had just begun to feel solid again. I had collided with Bobby Plunkett during practice at Albany Academy the week before last Christmas, and my 2 front teeth broke off under the gum line, pushed straight through my upper lip, and lodged in his forehead. I was knocked on my ass, probably in shock, but Bobby was sprawled out unconscious. My 2 half teeth sunk into his skin like 2 tiny goalposts. I yanked them out and shoved them back in place. Would I do that today? I don't think so. Then I had to finish the practice because Coach Morrison was such an asshole about sucking up the pain, like always. My dentist told me those teeth were history and begged me to let him put in a bridge, but I wouldn't go for it. And those teeth knitted themselves together again. A dental miracle. The second that Nils punched me, I reached for my mouth to see if those 2 teeth were still there. I can't remember what I said to him. Something uncool, that's for sure. What the fuck? Or what did I? Probably. But whatever it was, it stopped short when he hit me again. Same place, right in the mouth. I didn't fall down, which surprised me, and it didn't even hurt that much until later. I just climbed back into my boat and drove home. I wasn't stupid enough to hang around and get the shit completely kicked out of me. Okay, thanks, my father says and hangs up the phone. You know who that was? I nod. I don't need him to tell me it was Bill Henderson, his pal who owns the marina. Give the kid his job back? Billy probably deserved it. Jesus, who else would he say that to? Mr. Henderson had seen what happened on the gas dock from his office window, and I heard he fired Nils right away, which he should have, for Christ's sakes, assaulting a customer. My older brother and his pal, a bruiser named Mike Hopper, had rushed over there as soon as I told them, looking to kick the crap out of the preppy football star, but he was already gone. My brother actually tried to defend me. That shocked me even more than getting sucker punched. And now my father wants this jack-off rehired? What kind of bullshit is that? You let some reindeer fucker smack you around in front of a friend of mine? My father yells now. You didn't even try to punch him back? What about all the money I spent on Dom Girasitano in the boxing lessons? You didn't even throw one punch? Have you seen Nils? I answer. He's a giant. He would have killed me if I fought back. I expect him to jump up and grab me, but he leans back in his chair and says, I'll tell you what you could have done, smart aleck. Bob Sherry and I went up to Canada this week. You know that, right? To the Des Moines River Rod and Gun Club, where I took Stephen last year. My father's never taken me there. I'm trying to remember what my younger brother Stephen told me about that trip. Moose Lake, he called it, and I can only dredge up a few details. The seaplane bounced hard on the lake when it landed. The board in Batten Lodge had only one big room and 6 bunk beds. He had to use an outhouse past the huge fire pit where they cooked the pike and trout they caught. And Bob Sherry got stewed to the gills by sunset every day, pulling on a flask he kept in his Orvis vest and slinging racial slurs at the Indian guides as they cooked. Oh, yeah, and there were pancakes. Amazing flapjacks they fried on the big iron griddles. Stephen loved those the best. So Bob Sherry is known as a tough, hardline manager who can keep labor in line by any means necessary, my father drones on. But I've heard this all before. He's staring at his hands as he talks, not at me, and I catch sight of the war scar below his right knee. It was from Normandy 2 days after D-Day, he told me. On patrol, what was left of his ranger platoon was walking a road between some hedgerows, and a machine gun opened up on them. They all dove left, but he dove right and landed in the trench with the Nazi machine gunners. He killed them all, but one slashed him with his bayonet before he died. I'm wondering what Wild Bill's war scar looks like when a dead fish smell floats up suddenly from the lake. It's probably a rock bass, white and slimy and wall-eyed, bobbing along the hull of my father's Chris Craft, stinking up the inside of the boathouse. It makes me think of the first 2 lines of one of my poems the New Yorker rejected. The fawn left at the fold of the mountain root had your noon face at the funeral. 5 beats in that first line, and I am, 2 dactyls, a trochee, and that dangling, stressed final syllable. Maybe that was the problem, I'm thinking, as I scan the metrics in my head. But now I hear, Bob Sherry's usual guide, an Indian named Jughead, showed up drunk in the middle of the first night, along with this runt of a cab driver, my father is saying, and I start to pay attention. Mr. Bob, we need your help, Jughead said to him. Our car is stuck down the road. But Sherry told him to get lost. Then we offered the cab driver and Jughead a cot in the guide's cabin for the night, but the cab driver said, nah, couldn't do that. His wife would think he was with another woman. He wanted to take the battery from our 4-wheel drive, and Bob said, forget it. We're only up here for 5 days. I'm not going to lose a full day of fishing for you. So the cab driver swore at him and left to walk the 20 miles back into town. The mosquitoes looked like dragonflies up there. They must have eaten that guy alive. Now I can see this little native guy, pissed off, trudging home in the rain, mud in the tire tracks sucking at his boots, plotting some revenge, and I think, I could probably make this story into a narrative poem. But what's the right model? Ginsberg's Howl, maybe? That long poem's in his voice, though, first-person POV. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked. Hell no. This is an Indian cab driver in the woods, not a queer hippie poet in Greenwich Village. What about Frost's home burial? Third-person narrator, that could work. He saw her from the bottom of the stairs before she saw him. But who's the narrator, my father? Me? I'll need to learn a lot more about that rod and gun club, that's for sure. Are you listening to me? My father demands. And I make myself stare right at him. So the next day we got back from fishing about 3 p.m., he says now, and pretty soon a pickup truck came out of the woods and stopped in our clearing. I was in front cleaning fish, getting them ready to cook, and Bob Sherry was talking to John Reed, another friend of ours. Well, out of the truck steps the puny cab driver along with 2 big Indians, all of them carrying baseball bats. This runt wanted to fight Bob, who's over 6 feet. He's got muscles in his shit. You've seen him. You know what I'm talking about. Get lost, half-breed, Sherry barked at him. Then the cab driver spat out some Indian curse. The other Indians laughed, and he started slapping the bat against his leg, moving toward Bob. John Reed stepped in to help, and before you could say look out, the cab driver lashed out with his foot and knocked John flat. My father stops there and stares back at me. What happened, I say. You tell me, he answers. What am I trying to tell you? I don't know, I stammer. If you're little, you carry a bat. What the hell happened? Nothing happened, he says. A woman who was in the lodge came out onto the porch, and the cab driver stepped back. You're lucky there's a woman here. You come back again, I'll beat your ass, the cab driver yelled. And then they all got back in the truck and drove off. Sherry got so unnerved he made us all leave. He said, who knows what that little son of a bitch might do? It's a fucking wilderness after all. Guy might round up some more savages and massacre us in the middle of the night. Now he shakes his head. You didn't listen hard enough. It's about balls. I guess when push comes to shove, Bob Sherry didn't have them, and neither do you. That Norwegian kid made an honest mistake, okay? Somebody told him you'd been stealing gas, and that meant money he had to make up out of his paycheck, so he lost his temper. He hit the wrong customer, that's all. He owned up to his mistake, told Bill Henderson he was sorry. Why should he lose his job over that? More important, though, is you acted like a coward. I'm not a coward, is the best I can muster. Well, you're not much of a man, he says. You spend all day chasing around after that skirt, Helen. You cook hamburgers in that tin dump all night. And your mother tells me you're writing poetry now. Is that true? Maybe I shouldn't pay for college next year and just let you get drafted. How about that? You think Vietnam could turn you into a man? I know this is the moment I should do something. Go toe-to-toe with the bastard or tell him to fuck himself and walk away. But Mike Lewis suddenly appears inside my head. Mike Lewis, who had tried to teach us English in 8th grade at Albany Academy. Mike Lewis, who had cerebral palsy like my brother David. Except for him, it just caused minor damage in his brain and only affected the way he walked. He'd tip to his left side and move his right arm spasmodically to balance himself as he paced back and forth in front of the classroom. His walk was hypnotic. We couldn't take our eyes off him. Then one day in class, Mike started talking about his friend Rory, who had fought in Vietnam as an Army Ranger. Early on, before Kennedy was assassinated, when the government was claiming we had only sent advisors over there. Rory ran nighttime kill missions in Laos and took left ears as trophies. He strung all those ears on a long strand of fishing line, and he wore that human necklace. Even after he came home to the States, it became Mike's friend or roommate or whatever he was. I have no idea now what Rory was supposed to mean to us, what point Mike was trying to prove. Maybe it wasn't for us. Maybe Mike Lewis wanted to make himself seem dangerous by association, so we'd be too afraid to throw spitballs or paper airplanes in his classroom. Or maybe he was just telegraphing his disdain for privileged 12-year-old kids he had to teach in a military prep school, wise-ass punks who mimicked his crippled walk behind his back. This place blows, he used to say, smiling sideways. Or no, he'd add, tipping his head toward you, on second thought, maybe it doesn't blow enough. And now I could see he was right. For all the mountains that ring this glacial lake, and in spite of all the hot girls in bikinis waving from boats, or the narrow islands where Helen and I can find a private spot and screw around all afternoon, this place doesn't blow enough. This isn't a life worth what it costs. I don't want to imagine myself cutting off a dead man's ear or wearing a string of those shriveled ears around my neck just to be somebody else's idea of a man. And I'm not about to do all the other bullshit that will make my father welcome me into his kind of club. Wild Bill was right. A bunch of animals. Where's the soup pot? Where's the screen door? Thank you. Appreciate it. I don't know if you have any questions or not, but I do think it's worth noting that 5 of our 7 faculty readings have been nonfiction life writing. They're pretty unusual. We never had that before, that number. So I know many of you are toiling in that same vineyard with life writing, whether you're turning it into fiction or actually keeping it nonfiction. So it'd be nice whether we start it now or do it later to actually start talking about memoir, because we haven't really talked about it very much. Any questions about memoir? Anybody wants to bring up? Yovaria.
So in your piece, you do a lot of dialogues.
Yeah.
And I find that one of the most challenging things to write about memory is dialogue, and sometimes you create your own idea of what happened and your own conversation in your head. So how do you tackle that in your piece?
Well, that's a tough question and a good question. And, of course, nobody can remember dialogue from when they were 16 years old. It's impossible. I mean, I can't remember what I said this afternoon. Really. So, just speaking for myself, I do the best I can to remember and make it truthful. Some of those things I actually do remember, some of those lines I do remember because, they were so, maybe Billy deserved it, about getting beaten up by a guy. When your own father betrays you like that, that kind of sticks in your memory forever. But some of the other stuff, Dom Girasitano, I think he did say that. He was a boxing coach I had when I was 12. But sometimes you have to just do your best to be as truthful as possible. If you don't completely make up the dialogue the way James Fry did in his book, I think you're on the right track if you try to stay honest to the occasion. And also, I just like dialogue, too. Other questions about memoir? Beaten into submission, are you? Thank you so much.